Hi, how you doing? I fully intended to record lots of videos over the weekend. Clearly, I failed. I was away at the Noble Science, which is a weekend event that I run, which focuses on unarmed historical European martial arts. We get together for a whole weekend and we take over a lovely matted hall and we look at various different arts. This time we looked at some modern pad work drills. We looked at some basic falling and rolling, and that's kind of how we start the event. Get people used to moving around, getting down, getting back up again safely. And we use the pad work as a warm-up, if you like. And after that, we went straight into some of the much more specialised arts. We covered Scottish Backhold Wrestling. We covered Russian Sambo. We covered red zone self-defense. We covered classical pugilism. And we covered catch-as-catch-can wrestling. Now, most of you will be familiar with some of those. But what I'd like to talk to you today about is Scottish Backhold Wrestling. Partly because I love it. I've been lucky enough to train in it a few times now, not a huge amount, but enough to get a bit of a feel for how it works and to know that it's something I'd love to learn more about. And I'm very, very lucky to call the guy that came down to teach it for us and has done on a number of occasions a friend. We've become friends through wrestling. We originally met at the Snake Pit in Wigan, which is a catch-as-catch-can wrestling gym. And the chap in question, Scott Mellia, is a fantastic wrestler and a great coach. And he's competed internationally in backhold. And he comes down and he runs classes for us. It's fantastic. Now, backhold's a really interesting system. One of the things you notice when you look at European originating wrestling arts is that they almost all take place in some form of standing hold. There are one or two, traditional Lancashire wrestling, which is part of what became catch-as-catch-can, has some groundwork in. Some forms of medieval ringen have some groundwork in. But the vast majority of traditional styles are either jacketed or backhold in some degree or another, but they take place as a standing wrestling system so that when one of you hits the ground, that's the bout over. In the few outliers, that's not necessarily the case. So French wrestling, for example, when you hit the ground, it doesn't matter. The fight carries on until you get to a specific position on the ground, which is called a pin. Now, in backhold systems, it's actually the fall that counts. And it's quite an entertaining system to have a play with because it changes the game significantly. There's a lot of stuff you're not allowed to do. And so what that tends to mean is that the limitations mean that those things you are allowed to do suddenly become hugely technical. And small details that those of us that do catch-as-catch-can would kind of gloss over and ignore become massively important. Let me explain a little bit about it. When the two combatants come together, first thing you do is shake hands, and it's very formalized. You shake hands and then you take your grip. You have 30 seconds to take hold. And effectively, what you have to do is you take an underhook with your right arm. So your right goes under their left, and the same the other way around. So your left goes over their right, and you clasp your hands together behind their back. And they do exactly the same to you. Now, there's a vast amount that you can do just in that taking hold that allows you to gain control or lose control if you get it wrong. So every now and again, what you'll find is that the two opponents are actually jostling for position and they're trying to get under that underhook a little bit more. They're trying to control the other person's under and to get a really dominant grip. If they don't manage to take hold, within 30 seconds, then what happens is the referee brings in a third person who literally bends forward in between them, and they have to take hold over the top of the person that's leaning forwards. And that effectively takes away any of the fighting for position. Once the two have taken hold, the person in the middle walks away and the wrestling begins. The referee calls hold, which I find interesting because I use the call hold to tell people to stop. But in Scottish Backhold, the call hold is used to tell people to commence wrestling. And the two fighters then wrestle to either a throw or a break. You can beat your opponent by forcing their hands apart. If their grip breaks and your grip doesn't break, then you've won, as long as that happens above the height of the knees. When you throw your opponent, you're allowed to break your grip if your hands are below the level of your own knees. And what that means is that when you throw your opponent, you can break your grip and you can cartwheel or break fall or roll away from them and make it really very clear that it's them that's been thrown and them that hits the ground first. It doesn't matter how they hit the ground. If any part of them from the feet upwards hits the ground, then you have won. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting, because you can get a good solid hold, you can create a dominant position, you can throw your opponent, but if they somehow manage to twist slightly and your arm hits the ground and then they hit the ground, they've won. If the referee can't tell which one of you's hit the ground first and there's no clear break of grip, then it's what's known as a dog fall and you have to fight again. So what we'll do now is we'll watch a little clip of Scott Mellia demonstrating a cross buttock throw in Scottish Backhold at the Noble Science event that's just happened this weekend. I did manage to get a little bit of footage, but not enough for a proper video. So we'll watch that and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Now you set this up, I'm going to push him that way, hoping that he pulls back and spin through. Yeah? We'll go for a cross buttock now rather than a proper throw. So I'm pulling him this way. I go here. Oh, fuck. You're ready?
So there are a few things that you've probably noticed watching that. The first is that it's taking place outside on the grass. And that's very much on purpose. We had the matted hall and we could have used it and it would have been perfectly safe and perfectly acceptable to use the hall. But traditionally, backhold competitions take place outside on grass. And as the weather was nice, that's exactly what we did. We moved everything up to the grass and we had the whole hour and a half of backhold tuition out on the grass. You can see that as Scott puts that in, he sets up, he's rocking his opponent and he creates a little bit of space and turns within and gets his hips inside without breaking his grip. And as he's doing that, he's putting some real pressure on with his arms to force his opponent over. And then he uses his hip and his grip, which he's keeping closed, tight to pop them over his hip on the floor. It's a fairly standard throw that you see in a vast number of systems. But as his opponent goes down, what you'll see Scott doing is going down with him. He's making it absolutely crystal clear to anybody that's watching that he's not breaking his grip. His opponent's hitting the floor and Scott's landing on top of him. And that's quite an interesting point, because you see that technique in some Eastern martial arts, you see it in judo, you see it in sambo, you see it in mixed martial arts. People will deliberately try and land on top of their opponent during a throw in order to try and wind them, to try and make it a little bit more dominant and to make them a little bit warier if they're going to be fighting again. Backhold's usually fought to the best of 3 bouts. So if you can put some doubt in your opponent's mind with the first throw, then that's going to give you a distinct advantage with the next throws. Interestingly, in Icelandic Glima, it's very much frowned upon to land upon your opponent, because there's this real culture of respect within Glima, and you're expected to cartwheel away or roll away and step over your opponent as part of the actual, when we're going to throw our opponent and we're going to step over them to show that we could have hurt them, but we've chosen not to. So it's interesting that there are these little differences in backhold systems as well. One of the other things you'll notice is that the chap that hit the ground underneath Scott hit the ground really quite hard, and you can hear that he hit the ground quite hard. Apologies for the language. He was fine, by the way. He wasn't injured. He got up. It was just more of a surprise than anything. He carried on. He finished the lesson and finished the rest of the weekend. So there you go. That's a really simple technique. That's the sort of thing we do at the Noble Science. And to finish, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you one of the bouts that took place, because Scott likes to finish his sessions and seminars with an opportunity for people to actually try this out. So this is a Scottish Backhold Wrestling bout between two of the attendees at the Noble Science, and yeah, enjoy it. Keep your eyes open, noblescience.com. Come along to the next one. It's a fantastic event. Anyway, take care. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.